You don't like Donald Trump, do you?
I don't respect the manner in which he has carried out the presidency.
Okay. You despise Donald Trump, don't you?
Mueller
You just can't bring yourself to say that he didn't violate the law?
no.
Who appointed you to the United States Supreme Court?
I was
mean,
appointed.
that determined, isn't it a court of final jurisdiction decides what's constitutional and not? In fact, aren't most acts of Congress presumed to be constitutional?
They are presumed, but they're not always constitutional. And no, of course, I was not on the Supreme Court. And I can tell you, Senator, look, we really wrestled over this decision. I personally wrestled over this decision. And it was not one that I took lightly at all. But it was because I took my responsibility seriously as acting Attorney General.
I believe you believe what you're saying.
Yes, I do.
I'm just trying to understand this is likely to come up in the future.
Well,
at what point does an executive order or statute become unconstitutional? When I think it's unconstitutional, or you think it's unconstitutional, or a court of final jurisdiction says.
Part 1. All right, that moment right there. Who gave you the authority to sit on the United States Supreme Court? That's the whole point, everyone. And this is exactly why Senator Kennedy is such a valuable public servant. What you're witnessing here isn't just another heated debate that the mainstream media likes to highlight. Not at all. This is a real-time lesson in how our government is supposed to work. This is what happens when someone who truly loves this country and respects the Constitution takes a stand against the Washington establishment. You're looking at Sally Yates, a career bureaucrat left over from the Obama administration, who wasn't even elected by the people. She decided that her own opinions and her obsession with opposing Trump mattered more than following the actual laws on the books. She actually thought she could play all three roles, judge, jury, and enforcer, against a newly inaugurated president. But fortunately, we had Senator John Kennedy there. This man isn't your typical Washington politician. He's an exceptionally sharp attorney, and he wasn't about to let this un-American behavior slide. He could sense the constitutional violation from across the room, and he moved in to expose it completely. What you're seeing is a perfect example of how to completely dismantle the entire foundation of a liberal activist's position. Stay with me here and listen. If you're fed up with these Washington insiders who nobody voted for trying to control our nation, go ahead and smash that subscribe button right this second. We desperately need more of exactly this kind of accountability. All right, let's dive right into it.
Ms. Yates, I want to start with you. You declined to support, to defend President Trump's executive order because you thought it was unconstitutional. Is that correct?
that's correct, yes.
Okay. And you believe that no reasonable argument could be made in its defense. Is that correct?
Well, I don't know that I would put it in that way, Senator. This was the analysis that we went through.
Okay. Let me stop you because I've got a whole bunch of questions.
Okay.
I just want to understand your thinking from my perspective.
Sure.
Did you believe then that there were reasonable arguments that could be made in its defense?
I believed that any argument that we would have to make in its defense would not be grounded in the truth. Because to make an argument in its defense, we would have to argue that the executive order had nothing to do with religion, that it was not done with an intent to discriminate against Muslims.
Okay.
And
So
based on a variety of factors.
You were looking at intent?
Yes, and I believe that that's the appropriate analysis. And in fact, that's been borne out in several court decisions since that time, that that's the appropriate analysis when you're doing a constitutional analysis. It's to look to see what are you trying to accomplish here.
Okay. Suppose instead of an executive order, this had been an act of Congress, would you have refused to defend it?
If it were the same act, yes. And in fact, the Department of Justice has done that in the past. For example, with DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act, when the Department of Justice refused to defend DOMA.
But that was a political decision, was it not?
Well, I wasn't at Main Justice at that time, so I can't speak to that, but that was another example of when DOJ did not defend the constitutionality of a statute in that sense.
But in your opinion, the executive order is unconstitutional?
I certainly was not convinced that it was constitutional, and given that I wasn't in the import of this, I couldn't in good conscience send Department of Justice lawyers in to defend it.
Well, I want to be sure I understand. Do you believe it's constitutional or unconstitutional?
I was not convinced that it was constitutional. I believed that it was unconstitutional in the sense that there was no way in the world I could send folks in there to argue something that we didn't believe to be the truth.
So you believe it's unconstitutional?
Yes.
Okay. I don't mean to wax too metaphysical.
And if I can say, I can understand why you might be a little frustrated with the language
I'm
here.
not frustrated. I'm happy as a clam.
No, and here's the reason. Let me give you a little idea of the timing
Okay, but
of
let
this.
me stop you because I don't have much time. I got a lot of ground to cover.
Okay.
I don't mean to wax too metaphysical here, but at what point does an act of Congress or an executive order become unconstitutional?
Well, it all depends on what the act does.
No, but I mean, at what point is it become? I can look at a statute and say, I think that's unconstitutional. Does that make it unconstitutional?
I think the issue that we faced at the Department of Justice is to defend this executive order would require lawyers to go in and argue that this has nothing to do with religion.
But at what point does a statute or an executive order become unconstitutional? Is it some a priori determination? It becomes, I mean, what I'm telling you what I'm getting at, and I don't mean any disrespect. Who appointed you to the United States Supreme Court?
I was
mean,
appointed.
that determined, isn't it a court of final jurisdiction decides what's constitutional and not? In fact, aren't most acts of Congress presumed to be constitutional?
They are presumed, but they're not always constitutional. And no, of course, I was not on the Supreme Court. And I can tell you, Senator, look, we really wrestled over this decision. I personally wrestled over this decision. And it was not one that I took lightly at all. But it was because I took my responsibility seriously as acting Attorney General.
I believe you believe what you're saying.
Yes, I
I'm
do.
just trying to understand this is likely to come up in the future.
Well,
At what point does an executive order or statute become unconstitutional? When I think it's unconstitutional, or you think it's unconstitutional, or a court of final jurisdiction says it's unconstitutional?
I believe that it is the responsibility of the Attorney General, if the President asks him or her to do something that he or she believes is unlawful or unconstitutional, to say no. And that's what I did.
Okay, I get it. All right, let me ask you both a couple of questions. Can we agree, Director and Counselor, that the Russians attempted to influence the outcome of the election?
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Yes.
Do you believe that the Russians did, in fact, influence the outcome of the election, Director?
In our intelligence community assessment, we made the point that we could not make that call. The intelligence community has neither the authority, the expertise, or the resources to make that judgment. The only thing we said was we saw no evidence of influencing voter tallies in any of the 50 states. But we were not in a position to judge what actual outcome on the election.
How about you, Ms. Yates?
I don't know the answer to that. I think that's part of the problem is we'll never know.
Okay. Have you ever heard, the Russians have been doing this for years, have they not? I'm not minimizing what they did. I think they did try to influence the election.
It's absolutely true. And as I mentioned in my opening statement, sir, they've been doing this since at least the 60s.
Okay.
The difference, however, was this is unprecedented in terms of its aggressiveness and the multifaceted campaign that they mounted. That's new.
Isn't it a fact that in 1968, the Kremlin, actually Service A, which was part of the AGB, attempted to subsidize the campaign of Hubert Humphrey?
I don't know the specifics of that. I did want to research that, but again, that certainly comports with what the Russian tactics would be.
Okay. Isn't it a fact that in 1984, the Kremlin tried to stop Ronald Reagan from being reelected?
Again, I'd have to do some research to verify that, but again, it certainly comports with what, if they chose a candidate they for whatever reason they had an aversion to, they would do that.
Okay. General Clapper, have you ever leaked information, classified or unclassified, to a member of the press?
Not wittingly or knowingly, as I said in my statement.
Classified or unclassified?
Well, unclassified is not leaking. Unclassified, that's somewhat of a somewhat of a non sequitur.
Have you ever given information to a reporter that you didn't want to have your name connected with, but you wanted to see it in the paper?
I have not. I've had many encounters with media over my career.
I'm sorry about that. How about you, Ms. Yates?
Now, other than situations where the Department of Justice would arrange, for example, for me to talk on background with reporters about a particular issue, to educate them about that, no, I've certainly never provided classified information, and that would be the only kind of background information.
Do you
And
know?
I've done the same thing, but certainly not, that doesn't include sharing classified information.
Do you know anybody else at Justice who has ever leaked classified or unclassified information to the press?
No.
Ms. Yates?
No.
Okay, wow, absolutely every time. Just flawless. All right, let me walk you through this because how it starts is just as brilliant as how it ends. Did you catch his opening move? He's completely calm. He's not shouting or banging his fist on the desk like Democrats tend to do when things don't go their way. He carries himself like a true statesman, like a skilled prosecutor. Nothing but straightforward facts. He refused to defend the president's executive order. And look at her, she's so full of herself. She's practically glowing with confidence. She answers, "Yes, Senator," acting like she's some kind of hero. She has absolutely no clue that the trap just slammed shut around her. She walked into that hearing thinking she'd deliver some grand, heroic speech for the resistance movement, and Kennedy simply allows her to do it. He hands her all the rope she could possibly need to trap herself. She rambles on and on about her careful analysis and the president's intent, and how she just couldn't, in good conscience, send government lawyers into court to defend something she considered a lie. A lie, can you believe that? And who gets to make that determination? She does, apparently. This is exactly what these Washington elites and these far-left radicals completely fail to understand. Making that judgment call is absolutely not part of her job description. He even gives her a chance to stop. "Ma'am, I didn't request a long explanation." He's actually trying to save her from humiliating herself on live television in front of the entire nation, but she just keeps making it worse. She's so consumed by her own sense of moral superiority, her so-called principled position, that she completely misses the massive legal problem bearing down on her. And then he delivers the crushing blow. He's got her cornered. He poses the only question that actually matters here. At exactly what point does a law cross the line into being unconstitutional, Miss Yates? When you, someone who wasn't elected by anyone, simply feel that it does, or when the Supreme Court officially declares it unconstitutional, she's got nothing. She can't provide an answer because she realizes she's been completely exposed. She attempts to dodge the question. She tries to circle back to discussing the Attorney General's responsibilities again, and he just slices straight through all that meaningless fluff. Who gave you an appointment to the United States Supreme Court? Boom. The entire hearing room just goes silent. That's not merely a clever comeback, everyone. That is the fundamental legal principle. That is the entire case wrapped up in one question. He's literally teaching a basic first-year law school concept to the acting Attorney General of the United States. Let that sink in for a moment. He's reminding her and every single person watching that we live in a constitutional republic. We operate under an established system. We maintain a separation of powers between branches of government. The executive branch, that's where she works, is responsible for enforcing our laws. The judicial branch, that's our court system, is responsible for determining what aligns with the Constitution and what doesn't. You don't just roll out of bed one day, decide you have a problem with the president, and crown yourself as a one-person Supreme Court. This perfectly illustrates what activist overreach looks like, and he just exposed it for every single person in America to witness. It's absolutely remarkable. But wait, there's more. He's far from finished. He just destroyed her entire understanding of constitutional law, and then he switches gears so quickly it's dizzying. All right, now let's discuss Russia. You can practically read her mind thinking, oh, thank goodness, here's a topic we can all get behind. Absolutely wrong. This is the double whammy. This is the finishing move. Kennedy asks her directly, did they interfere in our election? She responds, yes, with complete seriousness. And then he follows up with the actual question, the one that the biased mainstream media never wanted anyone to ask. Did their interference actually change the election results? And you can literally watch the panic wash over her face. She hesitates. She understands she's been cornered again. No proof of that whatsoever. Game over once again. In under 5 minutes, this brilliant man managed to get an attorney general appointed by Obama to confirm on the official record 2 absolutely critical facts. First, that she genuinely believes her personal feelings override the authority of our entire judicial system. And second, that the whole Russia changed the election conspiracy theory, the exact narrative they were pushing to undermine President Trump's legitimacy from his very first day in office, was a complete failure. Their interference didn't work. He got her to acknowledge all of it on camera. This is precisely why we desperately need public servants like John Kennedy serving in Washington. He's not putting on a performance. He's doing the hard work. He's not there to look good for the television cameras. He's there to protect the rule of law and shine a spotlight on these politically motivated bureaucrats. That was a perfect 10 out of 10, an A+ demonstration of senatorial oversight. An absolute living legend, but I want to know what you all think about this. Am I on target here? Is this the kind of constitutional protection we need to see more of in Washington? Or do you believe it's acceptable for these unelected Democratic operatives to simply ignore and overturn laws they personally disagree with? Drop your opinion in the comments section. This is a massively important conversation, and I genuinely want to know where each of you stands on this issue. And hey, if you really enjoyed this detailed breakdown, do me a favor. Tap that like button and subscribe to the channel for more videos that cut straight through the Washington spin and nonsense. Man, I think I need to watch that exchange one more time. I'll catch you in the next video.